Yeah. Good morning. I'm going to draw something out of my pocket here, which you'll recognize, just as we've had breakfast. But this symbolizes and represents something that has gone through history. Actually, just for point of reference, the orange carrot came into Britain around Elizabeth I's time. Before that, we had different colored carrots, purple carrots, white, and yellow carrots. Now, why I'm bringing this carrot here is really because the symbol of it is that before us, before the generations before us as well, they had, of course, saved the seeds on their farms in their locations. And that represents something that, to me, is important because without this, I wondered, excuse me, is it possible to have a little bit more light on here in the front? Are you okay with that? I consider that agriculture in the past has been a success. What we've had for thousands of years has been traditional farming. It has been integrated farming. And it's on the basis of that a huge crop diversity has been able to develop. Farmers saving seeds in their locations wherever they have been. We have seen really, in the last 100 years, huge changes in agriculture. And I think especially in the last 70 years after the war, what has happened in agriculture, in a certain sense, has changed people's lives, has changed farmers' lives, has changed our society. It is really, one can say, on the back of this change that we are now having to resort to doing things that maybe we would never have considered to do before, or to take up things that we wouldn't have considered to do before. The fact that, that industrial agriculture has replaced a kind of traditional farming, as Peter said on Thursday, is causing great concern. But to put this in context, really, with the seed, is that the changes that we have seen in agriculture has made it so that what I would consider as something valuable and important in our time, which is that, and particularly that is what belongs to biodynamics, is this farm organism. The farm organism, which, in a certain sense, as far as I'm concerned, also has steered a course in time, because as we look back over traditional farming over thousands of years, which was based in a way which was common sense. It was common sense because everything that was produced for the locality. It wasn't produced so that it had to travel thousands of miles. It was a common sense because people were living in their places and that people were not traveling so much back in the past. We didn't have the oil out of the ground that has made everything completely different in our time, whereby we can now move and shift things around at quite a pace, and we've had to adapt according to these methods and principles. this is what I would call a farming wheel. I call it a farming wheel simply because what has sustained generations before us has really been on the basis of all the people working in agriculture. It's just today that we are now seeing this extraordinary change where maybe 1.5% of the population here is engaged in agriculture. More than 50% of the world population is now living in cities. So this is an enormous change that we are finding ourselves in. And hence also the lack of understanding, you can say, about what is going on in agriculture with our soils, in food production, people living in cities, children not quite understanding where our food comes from, and so forth. But really what has kept everything together as local food has been this picture as a farming wheel, because as we find in the biodynamic organism, pretty much is consistent, is that we have the animals. That is a must because of the fertility, and the presence of the animals on the land is very important. We have the grains, and we have the grasses. In many farms we see today, and I'll come back to that, is that we have the fruit. And that's top fruit and soft fruit often. And here in this last quarter, we have the vegetables, herbs, and flowers. So that's pretty much what an organism, what exists, what is growing on a farm. And this picture you would have had also really in our traditional farming methods because, of course, the farmers, they needed to have the animals, they needed to have the fertility. There was often also, there was grain, and of course there's the grazing, the animals. There would have been fruit to have more of a balanced diet, the vegetables, herbs, and flowers. So all this would have been important. And when you look at today in agriculture, when you look at actually what has happened is that we have fragmented this in our modern times. So we've specialized either just in vegetable production, and even within vegetable production, we just cauliflower production or calabrese production, or if it's animals, we just keep sheep, just keep dairy cows, just grow grain, or just top fruit, just soft fruit. So in a certain sense, this holistic picture has been pulled apart, has been fragmented and specialized. And it's only been possible simply because we've had oil as the basis to do all that, to minimize input costs and to maximize profits. The biodynamic farming practice in the farm as an organism, as Rosanna talks about in the second lecture, I find when I look is that this picture has been consistent, so nothing has changed really for what has been a traditional farming where the emphasis has been on farming for the locality, for the local people, rather than turning your back, like we see from modern farms, they're turning their back on the communities. The milk is going to the milk marketing board far away. It may not even come into the village or into the towns, so there's no relationship, there's no connection between the local farms and the local community. In biodynamics, we have our front, we are turning towards the people in our communities rather than our backs to them. And I find this has been consistent with biodynamics. I'll say maybe even organics, although it is not made conscious with organic agriculture in this way. Some organic farms do tend, out of just who they are and out of what maybe lives in the farmers for what they aspire to as well. But you do have stockless organic farms as well. As a matter of, this is very individual, what people sometimes, where they're at in their lives as well, and what is important to them. But this is primarily what has been consistent, I find, in biodynamics, is this picture, while everything else has been pulled apart and has had to somehow take a different course. Of course, what is at the center of this here is the seed, because without that seed, and I'm going to make it radiate a bit into this organism, because it is the center. Without it, even in the animal kingdom, there would be no further generation. In the grasses, in the grains, there would be no further generation, and so forth. What we've seen with the changes, really since the Second World War, and it started already nearly 100 years ago, is that the whole emphasis on looking at plants, the understanding of hybridization. Hybridization is a natural method that happens in nature. How can that be made use of for our gain, so to speak? And that has been a huge search and a task that's been undertaken, and a lot of research and finance has been put towards that. It has meant that the traditional crops, and that is what we call the traditional crops. So we look back 100 years ago, the world was existing on what we call open pollinated crops. That means open pollination is simply just those are plants that you can save from year to year, and they will breed true to type if you don't allow them to cross with varieties or with members of the same family. So open pollinated crops is really the bedrock. It's the backbone of our culture, what has brought generation through in time, and what has given us this enormous diversity over time as well. So what this change we see in industrial farming is that gradually our open pollinated crops start to become replaced by F1 hybrids. And really, when we move into the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, that is when we see that seed companies have let go of maintaining open pollinated, the reproducible varieties. The seed companies have let go of maintaining those because all the focus is on the non-reproducible F1 hybrids. So we're seeing an enormous change, really, in our time, whereby in the past, farmers, gardeners were engaged in the seed saving, in maintaining of crop biodiversity in locality. This has been taken out, it's been fragmented. It's simply the seed has been taken out of this organism and it's been specialized into seed companies. And we have a situation now in our time where we've just got the producers and we've got the reproducers. They've been separated. This means that the producers no longer have the skills, the basic knowledge of how do I save seeds from the crops that I grow. I've contracted that out to the reproducers who have not much understanding really of what goes on here either. So there's been a divide, a separation here, which initially was not too separated because there was a much better understanding. Farmers became breeders, and there was a much better understanding. Today we moved into laboratories in white coats, and we have a very different picture and scenario happening in our time. The concern is that because of the rapid change of the moving away from open pollination to F1 hybridization, F1 hybridization is really, one can say, geared for industrial agriculture, for the supermarkets, so that we can go into supermarkets and the customers want, I'm not sure they really wanted. And this is a question of who initiated the idea that we've all got to have leeks, onions, carrots, cauliflower the same size. But in this situation here, skills and an understanding of the whole reproduction of our plants has basically been lost because of the way that we have structured ourselves in the last 30 to 40 years. I think an important part I'm just going to bring in just to highlight also where we are. That is and there are two things happening at around this sort of time. So I hope you can read this, 1985, 86. You're probably quite aware of the chemical companies that have become very large in our time, especially those companies called 5 minutes. Right. DuPont, Monsanto, Dow Chemicals, Syngenta, just very quickly. But they moved into seeds at around this time in 1986. Monsanto did in 1986. The others came, I think, a little bit later on. But that has meant huge changes also. We are now seeing genetically modified crops. The genetically modified crops is what has also brought something to the attention of the public. Around the year 2000, 1999, year 2000, we suddenly see in this country the interest growing. There's something happening with our seeds. The interest growing to save seeds ourselves. So we've got gardening groups around the country now. And for example, in Brighton, every year in February, you've got an event which is called Seedy Sunday. More than 3,000 people come through the door. People it's caught people's attention to do. There's something about the seed that we've got to take hold of. And it is fundamental. And that's why in 1985, the biodynamic movement really took hold of this as well in Germany, in Europe, and also here in England, that the food that we grow, we have integrity in biodynamics. The seed is the center. Let us take hold of the seed. Let us bring it in as well. We're looking after our own fertility. We're looking after our own feeds. We can't keep relying on seed companies to produce, to breed, or to provide the seed for us. And also because what we were faced with was the non-reproducible F1 hybrids, which are dead ends. We can do nothing with them. For our purposes, which is nutrition lies as an important part in biodynamics. And the nutrition is being steered also through the plant breeding. And this is an important part because it is about being able to maintain and to still take control of the situation like we are doing in biodynamics as it is. It's the only way that we can remain free, so to speak. And taking hold of the seed is part of that. It is part of reclaiming something that has otherwise been taken and locked away, on the one hand in hybrids and locked away in laws, that is going to make it much more difficult for us to come back to. In this country now, we do have Stormy Hall seeds, which started around this time, and 1985, 86, as has been also happening on the continent, and a seed group developed, seed growers within the biodynamic movement developed, and so now the initiative is, as I've just said before, there is this interest for the seed. The organic movement is also beginning to wake up, not just to be dependent on seed companies, but actually to take hold of that seed themselves as well. So in the year 2012, the Biodynamic Association decided, well, let's also look into doing some breeding now, because we do need to develop new varieties of open pollination, of open pollinated varieties, new reproducible ones that can be saved and readapted, if you like, to different locations. And so the initiative of the Biodynamic Association was to start a program of plant breeding. And so in just October last year, 2013, a location was found up in Essex, which is going to be the home for plant breeding and for increased seed production in this country. And next door, you'll probably have seen on the store, there's this flyer, the Seed Cooperative, so which has been set up now. And so please do take a leaflet next door, and if you're interested to be kept in contact, there's a list there to put your name down. And I think I'm going to stop there.